My dad used ChatGPT to write his father of the groom speech for my brother's wedding, and when my brother found out the truth, it was me my whole family turned on, not him. I'm 16, and my parents have been divorced for about 4 years now. My brother is 25, and he and my dad have always had this tense, complicated relationship, the kind where they're perfectly civil at family gatherings but there's clearly something unresolved sitting underneath every single interaction. My brothers always felt like dad wasn't really there emotionally growing up, worked constantly, missed birthdays, showed up late to things that mattered, and dad's answer to all of that, whenever it comes up even a little, has always been that he did his best and doesn't see the point in dragging up the past. You can probably picture exactly the dynamic I'm describing, because most families have some version of it. I've always been sort of caught in the middle of the two of them, close enough to both that I hear versions of the same old resentment from each side separately, which over the years has basically turned me into an unofficial translator between two people who love each other but have never quite figured out how to say so directly. Every big family event for as long as I can remember has had this same undercurrent running through it. A birthday dinner where my brother makes some pointed comment about dad working through his graduation, a holiday where dad brings up, a little too proudly, all the things he provided even during the years he wasn't around much emotionally. Nobody ever really addresses it head-on. It just sits there under the surface, year after year, waiting. So when the wedding got announced, I remember actually feeling nervous on dad's behalf, wondering whether he'd find some way to show up for my brother in a way that finally landed, instead of another version of the same old pattern repeating itself on the biggest day of my brother's life so far. 2 nights before the wedding, dad knocked on my bedroom door looking a little sheepish and asked if I could help him with something. He said he needed to write his speech, but he was exhausted from the wedding prep and every other logistical thing he'd been handling that week, and he didn't think he had it in him to sit down and find the right sentimental words on his own. So he asked me to show him how to use ChatGPT to help. I walked him through logging on, and we typed in a prompt together describing the relationship, the wedding, the kind of tone he wanted. That was basically it. He read through what came out, nodded along, copied it into his notes app, and changed maybe 2 words total before deciding it was done. I actually asked him, right there in my room, if he really wanted to stand up in front of everyone and say something he hadn't actually written himself on a day that was supposed to be entirely about my brother. He just shrugged and told me it said things better than he ever could have on his own. I didn't push it any further after that. Honestly, some small part of me assumed he wouldn't actually go through with reading it word for word at the reception, that he'd use it as a rough starting point and shape it into something more his own before the actual day arrived. That's not what happened. The wedding itself was genuinely beautiful, one of those days where everything somehow comes together despite all the stress leading up to it. When it came time for dad's speech, he stood up, unfolded his notes, and delivered every single word of it, and it landed exactly the way sentimental speeches are supposed to land. People around the room were openly crying. My new sister-in-law was crying. My brother looked completely moved, like something between him and dad had actually shifted right there in that moment, years of distance closing in the space of about 90 seconds, and he hugged dad afterward in a way I genuinely hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. I sat at my table watching all of it happen and felt something twist hard in my stomach, because I was the only other person in that entire room who knew exactly where those words had actually come from. Later that night, after a few drinks for pretty much everyone but me, my brother found me off to the side of the reception while things were starting to wind down. He looked genuinely happy, a little emotional still, and he asked me straight out if he thought dad had actually meant what he said up there. I hesitated for a second, long enough that I probably should have just changed the subject, but I felt bad holding it back from him, so I told him the truth. I said something like, well, he used ChatGPT to write it, so maybe. For a second he actually laughed, like he thought I was joking, and asked if I was serious. I told him I was. I explained, probably faster than I should have, that dad had come to me 2 nights before, that I'd shown him how to do it, that he'd barely changed a word before deciding it was ready. I watched my brother's whole face change in real time, right in front of me, the happy, slightly drunk warmth from 20 minutes earlier just draining straight out of it. He didn't yell or make a scene or say anything dramatic at all, which honestly might have been worse. He just went quiet, said okay, and walked away, and I didn't see him again for the rest of the night, not even to say goodbye when people started leaving. By the next morning, I woke up to almost a dozen texts from different family members, including my own mom, who's divorced from my dad and somehow still ended up firmly on his side in all of this. Everyone was saying some version of the same thing, that I'd ruined a genuinely beautiful moment between my brother and my dad, that I could have just kept my mouth shut for one single night out of respect for the occasion. One message from an aunt actually said I should have let him have that moment, like protecting an illusion mattered more than my brother knowing the truth about something he'd asked me me directly. Another cousin told me flat out that some things are better left unsaid, as if my brother hadn't been the one to ask me the direct question in the first place. I called my best friend that afternoon just to talk it through, mostly hoping she'd tell me I was overreacting or that it would blow over, and instead she just went quiet on the phone for a second before asking me the same thing I couldn't stop asking myself, whether I would have wanted to know if I were him. I didn't say any of it to be cruel, and I definitely wasn't trying to ruin my brother's wedding day. I just didn't love watching him connect so deeply with something that wasn't actually real, something that had been generated in under a minute and barely touched afterward. My brother's barely speaking to Dad again now, back to the same distance as before the wedding, and he's barely speaking to me either, which honestly might be the part that stings the most out of all of it, since I was the one who told him the truth when he asked me directly, not the one who faked the whole speech in the first place. When I posted this looking for outside opinions, the reaction ended up genuinely split, more evenly than almost anything else I've seen posted like this. One argument that came up constantly was that Dad still chose those exact words himself, even if a program suggested them first, and that standing up and reading them out loud in front of everyone he loved meant something real regardless of where the sentence structure originally came from, and that it wasn't fair for me to erase that meaning just because of how the words got onto the page. A blunter version of that same argument put it a lot more directly, telling me flat out that I still had a lot of growing up to do and needed to think harder about how I treat people, especially my own brother, on a day that was never supposed to be about me at all. But there was a real, sizable group of people who saw the entire situation completely differently, who pointed out that I'd been put in an impossible spot either way, that lying to protect the moment risked my brother resenting me even more later if he ever found out on his own through someone else, and that all the anger landing on me specifically was aimed at exactly the wrong person, since the one who'd actually faked the sentimental moment in the first place was Dad, not the 16-year-old who eventually told the truth about it when directly asked. A decent number of people also pointed out something I hadn't fully considered myself, that I was still a teenager being put through an adult level of social calculus in real time at a wedding, expected to weigh my brother's short-term happiness against long-term honesty in the span of about 3 seconds, standing off to the side of a reception with a drink in someone else's hand and none in mine. A fair number of comments went completely sideways from the family drama altogether and just latched onto the AI part specifically, people saying they'd started noticing this exact thing more and more at weddings and funerals lately. Sentimental speeches that sound just a little too polished, a little too structured, and wondering out loud how many other rooms full of crying guests have applauded something that nobody in that family actually sat down and wrote themselves. Honestly, sitting with all of it since that night, I don't think I actually regret telling him. I think I regret the timing more than I regret the truth itself. I keep going back and forth on whether there was ever a version of that night where I could have waited, found a quieter, more private moment somewhere down the road, said it more gently than I did, instead of answering him right there in the middle of a conversation with the music still going and drinks still moving around us. But I also can't shake the feeling that if I'd lied to him that night, and he'd found out some other way months or years from now, through Dad slipping up or someone else letting it out, that would have hurt him, and hurt us, far worse than this did, in a way that might never have fully healed once he found out I'd known and said nothing. So I'll leave you with it the exact way I left it with Reddit. Was I wrong to tell him the truth the moment he actually asked me, or was my family just angry at the wrong person entirely? Let me know your verdict below.